What's up, guys? It's Joe, and just as we're starting, people are texting me. God damn it. Either way, Luke, welcome back. You're seeing us again in person. A little bit of surprise. I know. I didn't think we were ever going to do this again, and I do it. I'm wearing a Ramondre Stevenson jersey, so we might fumble this podcast. We'll see, but yeah, we are back again this week, and as always, we have our 3 players, 1 sleeper player that we're going to go over. We got a pretty good hit rate going on this show. Woody Marks obviously kind of fell off a little bit, but we talked about Stephon Diggs a few weeks ago and how he was going to get more involved in the offense. That ended up coming true. So we'll try to keep up some of these predictions and the good info regarding these players going forward. So why don't we kick it off with your first player, Luke, that you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so my player is Breece Hall to start things off. And Breece Hall is sort of the beneficiary of Braylon Allen's unfortunate injury that's going to keep him out for 3 months, maybe, probably close to the whole season, they believe. And he took that opportunity and turned it into his biggest usage, biggest touch rate in week 5 by a pretty substantial margin, with 78% of the opportunity share there for the Jets. And it makes sense. I mean, I don't think anybody's like absolutely clamoring and pounding the table to get Isaiah Davis on the field for anything other than, some third down work, stuff like that. And Breece Hall had 4 targets too. It's not like he was completely taken out of the receiving game either. But his usage was highest than it's ever been all year last week, and I think that trend continues to point upwards, or at least stay flat. So the usage upside is something that I'm looking forward to with Breece Hall. I wasn't high on him coming into the year because of that Braylon Allen factor and because of the Justin Fields factor, but if he's going to be getting all of this usage, then his value can only go up. So that's a sneaky little buy, in my opinion, would be Breece Hall.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's not necessarily that we expect the Jets offense to take a step forward, because I don't know if they're capable of doing that, but yeah, no, for sure. Breece Hall, as of right now, seems like the bell cow in that backfield. There is some trade rumors that have really been going around, because I'm almost certain Breece is in a contract year. So it's something to keep in mind. I don't know how realistic it is, but the Jets are the only 0-5 team right now. So I guess it is always possible that Breece Hall does get traded, and that could affect his value, good or bad. So we'll see how that goes. My first player I want to talk about, another person who kind of started off the year a little disappointing, is A.J. Brown. So A.J. Brown, to me right now, is a glaring buy in fantasy leagues. And that's not something that I say lightly. It's not, because he's been dog shit kind of up to this point. He had one big game against the Rams, and other than that, he's been just kind of like a pain in your lineup every single week, and you're kind of forced to keep starting him. So, like, why would you want to trade for him? Well, a few reasons. One being A.J. Brown finally had the I need more targets talk with the team. Apparently, he sat down with Jalen Hurts and some other guys for well over an hour earlier this week. And that happened last year. It resulted in him being a wide receiver 1 going forward from that point. He ended up having better games. So that's one factor, right? It is the fact that A.J. Brown had that conversation with the team. He could be looking at more targets coming forward. But another reason, too, is that like A.J. Brown does have 35 targets in the last 4 weeks. It's not like he's not been getting targeted. That's almost 9 targets a week. It's just a matter of him being on the same page and actually connecting with Hurts. And we might get some more opportunities going forward as well, because the Broncos forced Jalen Hurts to throw the ball last week. They only had 10 designed runs and 38 pass attempts. Luke, I want to hear your thoughts. When was the last time you think the Eagles had 38 pass attempts or anything close to it?
Carson Wentz era, probably.
Not that dramatic, but it was week 3 of last year. Week 3 of last season is the last time. Week was the last time. So again, this is not a team that typically passes the ball that much, but there is a chance, defenses learn if they sell out to stop the run, there's a good chance they'll force Jalen Hurts to throw the ball, and teams may like their chances more with Hurts throwing the ball than obviously running the ball with guys like Saquon and stuff like that. And also, I'm pretty sure one of their linemen, Landon Dickerson, is also hurt, and he might miss a little bit of time. So with him out, without that added layer of protection, they might be dumping the ball off more, things like that. So we'll see. The run game might take a little bit of a hit with defenses keying in on that, which could cause A.J. Brown to be the beneficiary here. But all in all, right now you can also get A.J. Brown for pretty cheap, I'm assuming. I've tried in a couple leagues and I've come pretty close. I'll keep trying, of course, because I'm annoying like that. I'm the annoying guy who sends the same trade to 9 people until someone accepts it. Luke knows this. But yeah, I think there's better games on the horizon for A.J. Brown. I think now's a really good time to buy while that fatigue is still there for a lot of those A.J. Brown owners. So that's my take on A.J. Brown. Luke, who's your next player?
My next player is Kendre Miller. I just watched him tear apart my Giants defense last week, and he looks good out there. He has some juice. He's playing hard. And I mean, on the Saints team that's pretty old and pretty bad, he is a younger bright spot. I think that Alvin Kamara is a trade candidate at the least at the trade deadline. And if not, there's always the possibility of injury. And Kendre Miller has some standalone value even without all that noise. He was up to 45% opportunity share last week, the highest of the year. He basically earned himself a 50-50 split of this backfield already. And if the team moves on from Kamara, he's going to be one of the most heavily used backs in the league. So upside is limited because the Saints offense is just bad. And for that matter, their defense is bad too. And they'll be playing from behind a lot. But still, a running back with that much usage, as I said with Breece Hall, is at least a little bit valuable. And Kendre Miller is probably, if not on waivers, the last guy on somebody's bench in your league. So I'd be keeping an eye on waivers, keeping an eye on how teams are managing their roster. A shot at upside could never hurt. And I think it would be a good use of a bench spot to have Kendre Miller in it right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, especially with the noise that Alvin Kamara might be traded, he's, I believe, in a contract year. And this is a team where it's like you're 1-3 or 1-4, I guess. Yeah, the same 1-4, just be the Giants. What's interesting, too, about Kendre Miller's usage is that, the Saints were in last game. Obviously, they won. But, point being is, Kendre Miller didn't get the work because they were either in garbage time or blowing out the other team. This was a close game through and through, and Kendre Miller still continued to be involved in the offense. He actually had more carries than Kamara in this game. So, like you said, I think he's a great target. I think a good strategy here would be trading with the Kendre Miller owner, the same guy who has A.J. Brown and Kendre Miller, if you could, if that's the way the dice rolls. But yeah, add Kendre Miller as the throw-in. I mean, you make a trade with someone and be like, hey, throw in Kendre Miller and I'll do it. I think that's very possible and it could pay off. So I like that. Next up for my players, I want to talk about this Chargers backfield in the absence of Omarion Hampton. So with Omarion Hampton out of the picture, it's Hassan Haskins and Kimani Vidal. And there's a lot of split in the fantasy community about who everybody wants to take, who they think is going to lead this backfield. And the answer is, who cares? I think neither of them are Omarion Hampton. I don't think either of them are particularly great running backs. They're third and fourth string. I mean, Kimani Vidal was literally on the practice squad. He had to be pulled up for this game. Haskins was third fiddle. And especially after Najee went down, Haskins really wasn't involved at all. It was solely Omarion Hampton's backfield. I think Omarion had 100% of the running back opportunities either last week or the week before. I remember making the graphic and seeing 100 and being like, damn, this is all him. But No, so when Hampton did go down last week, Haskins did take over right after. He was the main back while Justin Herbert was on the field. But soon after, I think it was the following drive, they pulled Herbert from the game. Trey Lance came in, and once Trey Lance came in, so did Kimani Vidal. So last week, the work's going to look like it was split, but Haskins was really in when it mattered, and Vidal was in when it did not. But again, there's nothing special here. Haskins is a bit of a bigger back. He profiles as like a Carlos Hyde kind of guy. And that's the kind of running backs that Harbaugh has had in the system over the last few years. I mean, Najee and Hampton are both bigger backs. And then even last year, you had J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Gus the Bus, two bigger backs who are capable of taking that workload. Dobbins, maybe not so much. But point being, like, that's kind of the archetype that fits this backfield a little bit more. Vidal doesn't fit that as much. He had opportunities last year. He didn't really make the most of them. So I'm not a huge fan of Vidal in this situation. I think Haskins has a limited upside, but he's the guy I'm going to be targeting. All in all, I think this really just means that Justin Herbert passes the ball more. I don't think they're going to rely on their run game all too much. If it's short yardage or early down, sure. But, here's here. Can you get a yawn counter? I say that, but I'm the one editing. No, but at the end of the day, there was 6 targets per game over the last 3 weeks on average that were going to a Marion Hampton. And I don't think either of them are going to fill that role. So it wouldn't surprise me if those targets just went to the receivers, Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Quentin Johnson, all startable wide receivers this week and going forward, and even in the weeks prior. So a lot of value to be had with these receivers, not as much value to be had with these running backs. So that's my take on this backfield. Who is this last player? Are we on the last player now?
Last of the 3, and then we have
the 3, the secret player at the end.
So my third player is Travis Kelce. I'm going to say pretty confidently that you should be selling him off your team if you can at this point. And I know that's a little bit against the grain and the mold of how kind of the Chiefs' last few years have gone, where Kelce has had slow starts to the regular season, and then by the last few weeks, they have him as the focal point of the offense because that's what Patrick Mahomes does in the playoffs, and they want to get ready for that. But I feel like this year can be different, and he just had a really good week, 761 and a touchdown with 8 targets as well. So I think that's a good high selling point for Travis Kelce owners. He is getting out-targeted by Xavier Worthy in every game that Worthy plays. Worthy was not even fully healthy last year, and he massively last week, and he massively out-targeted Travis Kelce. Out-targeted him again this week. They're obviously trying to get him the ball in his hands. He's running the ball. He's catching it. They're throwing it his way. Travis Kelce is tied with Hollywood Brown for second on the team in targets this week. He was tied with Hollywood Brown for second on the team in targets last week, and Juju Smith-Schuster. So it feels like, at least the way this ball is getting spread around, Travis Kelce is more of a background factor. And Rashee Rice is going to be back at some point. And the Chiefs have made it very clear that they view Rashee Rice as a wide receiver 1 who can command double-digit targets every game. So if we're now talking about getting the ball in Xavier Worthy's hands, having to have some sort of run game, Rashee Rice getting 10 targets, where does that leave Travis Kelce? It leaves him as, please catch a touchdown for me this week, otherwise I'm in trouble. So I think that coming off of 20 PPR fantasy points last week, this is the perfect time to try and sell him. And yeah, you could probably get good value looking at his targets over the last couple of weeks too.
Yeah, and I think another important point here is that the tight end landscape, as fruitful as it seems, is a constant shit show outside of like 2 or 3 guys. So yeah, I mean that's great. Now is a great time to sell Travis Kelce. Rashee Rice is supposed to be coming back next week, so huge boost for a good amount of my leagues. But I know you as well. I think you have a handful of Rashee Rice shares. Yep. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And Kelce is only getting older, and he's only getting more battered as the season goes on. I feel like last year they ended up having to rely on Kelce as the season went on because guys got injured. I mean, obviously, Rashee Rice's knee just went the other way because Mahomes dove into it. Xavier Worthy was on and off the field as the season went on. So, yeah, I think it was more of a reliance thing, but definitely in agreement they did use him in the playoffs a good amount. So the last player I want to talk about is Chase Brown. So Chase Brown, if you drafted him highly, you are disappointed. You are very disappointed this season, almost like I'm disappointed in Ramondre Stevenson. But he still had the fourth highest opportunity share in the league. So the work is there. This is firmly his backfield. Another yawn. That's like, what, 3? What's changed now is Joe Flacco's in town. And that's kind of surprising to me. I mean, the Bengals said that they needed to replace Jake Browning, and they were looking for his replacement, and it wasn't on their team already. So the options really were Jameis Winston, Kirk Cousins, maybe Russell Wilson, and I guess Joe Flacco kind of fits that mold as well. That prompts Shadur Sanders to be the QB2, by the way, for the Cleveland Browns. But interesting to add Joe Flacco to this quarterback room for the Bengals. I don't think this is a skyrocket. I don't think this is the offense is back to quote unquote normalcy with a guy like Joe Flacco. A little bit of a boost just because Jake Browning was so much worse. I think having a veteran like Joe Flacco can result in longer drives, not as many 3 and outs, and obviously more plays is beneficial for Chase Brown and these receivers and so forth. So this isn't everything solved. This isn't everything's back to the way it was. This is just, okay, now we're going to have longer sustained drives. And if we can get more production out of the receivers, it could open things up more so for Chase Brown. This offensive line still sucks. I think easily one of the worst in the league. Chase Brown has been stuffed 14 times running out of the backfield, which is the 9th most in the league. So, yeah, again, if the offense gets better, so will Chase Brown. But it's not going to be like what we had with Burrow or what we could have had with Burrow. Hopefully, it's just enough to get the job done. So that's my hope with Chase Brown. If you have Chase Brown, your hope is PPR. He can get you 10 to 15. That's your hope. I wouldn't put my expectation all that much higher. So now, as we do, after our 3 players, we do have a quote unquote secret player that we want to talk. I don't know. Secret player sounds so dumb. But why am I saying secret? I don't even know where I'm getting at, dude. I need to start sleeping more. But wait, what do we call this? What I'm putting you on the spot right now. What do we call this?
Waiver wire pickups, deep league, deep stash. We'll figure it out.
Deep player, deep guys who are deep. Okay, Luke, who is your first guy? That deep guy. Give me your first deep guy. Oh, by the way, I say first, but we only have one each. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing here.
I'm going back to Jets again to talk about Mason Taylor, who is rostered in only 8% of leagues. Apparently, that's a little bit lower than I was expecting. But he's coming off a really big week with 10 targets to lead the team. And just as a rule of thumb, you may have heard us talking about Garrett Wilson coming into the season. Justin Fields' game plan tends to be look at the wide receiver 1, and if he's not open, run. That's what he did in Chicago. That's why DJ Moore had such a great year in Chicago. That's why I was so high on Garrett Wilson this year. Garrett Wilson's on half of my fantasy teams. So Mason Taylor having more targets than Garrett Wilson in a game means something significant to me. And so 10 this week, 7 last week in targets for Mason Taylor. That is a lot. And I know we were talking about the tight end landscape a little bit before, but I actually feel like the lower end of that tight end landscape is starting to shape up a little bit. You got guys like, Jake Ferguson, who was, projected around the top 10-ish tight end, is by far the tight end 1. Hunter Henry is putting up numbers. Tyler Warren is putting up numbers. And then you got these waiver guys like Mason Taylor, who's getting all of the 17 targets in the last 2 weeks. Theo Johnson, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. Darren Waller, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. I think the low end of that market is starting to establish itself a little bit. And out of at least those three guys that I just mentioned, Mason Taylor is probably my favorite. You have him getting actual consistent volume versus Darren Waller, who has 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, but I feel like that's the only time they throw him the ball is in the end zone. And that Miami offense is not particularly good. I don't think that they're going to be scoring all these touchdowns that Darren Waller has this unbeatable touchdown upside for. It feels like Jalen Waddle took over the Tyreek Hill role as the wide receiver 1. And it feels like after that, they're looking to Devon Achane as their second receiving weapon. So Darren Waller is not really a focal point of that offense outside of the red zone. And I mean, same with Theo Johnson, bad offense, getting looked at in the red zone, but that's it. The rest of the offense seems to be running with Jackson Dart, checking down to Wan'Dale Robinson. And Mason Taylor, also in a bad offense, to be fair, but he's getting thrown the ball. And this team is constantly playing from behind, and he's quickly turning into a safety blanket for Justin Fields, secondary to Garrett Wilson. So I think he has some pretty good upside to be a low-end tight end 1, at the very least, a very, very good tight end 2. And if he keeps getting used like this, he will be a tight end 1 going forward.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think most of what you said with Mason Taylor and company. I mean, I think it's just a matter of like, again, will the targets continue? 1, are they just trying to force Mason Taylor into the game? 2, are they going to throw that much? I mean, if they have games where they can run it with Breece Hall design runs or Garrett Wilson, that'll be the case. But yeah, I mean, it definitely doesn't hurt. On most of my teams, I try to have a tight end starting and then a high upside tight end on my bench. That's been my strategy in every league for as long as I can remember. And usually, it's almost like planting a seed. Like you have your starter and then you have your bench guy with upside. And then once that seed grows and turns into an actual tight end that you can trade him away, get value, and then I use that empty spot to get another tight end and just let him continue to grow and have someone with upside on my bench. And if they hit that upside, then I'm sending that guy away because there's, again, the tight end landscape, there's always teams that need a tight end. In every league, there's always going to be a team that needs a tight end. Darren Waller, I do disagree with on a little bit. I think the trust that Tua has in him is pretty significant, especially for how quickly he's getting involved in the offense. The snaps will only continue to go up. So I do think Darren Waller is the guy that you can rely on week to week, but time will tell. I could be wrong. I mean, I'm wearing a Stevenson jersey. What the hell do I know? But my last player to wrap this up, my secret / deep secret, Josh Downs, 50% of the snaps last week, which you're talking about a player that I'm trying to advertise, and I start off by saying he played half the game. So not a great start, right? But he did still lead the team in targets last week. He 7 targets, and he only played half the game. That's a 30% targets per route run. That's among the highest from last week. The problem with Josh Downs is he's playing out of the slot. And in most formations / personnels, when you play 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends in the field, oftentimes you're taking away that slot role. So you're keeping the 2 receivers on the perimeter, and then you might have 1 tight end in line. You might have another in the slot, but for the most part, when you're playing 12 personnel, you take away that slot receiver role, which is why Pittman is staying on the field longer. And then you have an Alec Pierce, A.D. Mitchell, Ashton Doolin last week for some reason, also staying on the field on that opposite side. So the opportunity for Josh Downs is going to be a bit hindered, especially for a team that likes to run the ball and has so much success running the ball with Jonathan Taylor, who might be the best running back in the league right now. So it makes sense to run 12 personnel and have that extra blocker from the tight end position. I'd much rather have Mo Alley Cox blocking than Josh Downs, I think. So, it makes sense. But it doesn't mean that Josh Downs can't have any sort of value. There's going to be games where Daniel Jones is going to have to throw the ball. And right now, Daniel Jones is looking pretty freaking solid. didn't really expect that to happen, but here we are. So regardless, I think again the opportunity is hindered, but Josh Downs is still getting the targets. He did still lead the team in targets, and he's worth stashing to see if he can create more of a consistent role. Maybe they start playing a little more 11 personnel, which I think would be huge. But yeah, that's where I'm at on Josh Downs. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this week. Luke, as always, thank you for joining, and we will see you guys next week. I gotta get better at intro. We're gonna work on it. We're gonna work on this. Me and Luke are gonna just sit down and talk to each other for an hour until we figure something out. Of course. I'm rambling. Go ahead. Bye.